The Honourable Member for Kamfinsa.
Madam Speaker, I'm grateful on behalf of the people of Kamfinsa constituency, as well as to help this debate to make a few comments. And I do hope that as we discuss this issue, our primary focus will be on how do we find a solution to the issue of Mopani. As I stand here, Madam Speaker, I want to indicate that I'll begin my debate from the aspect of the human resource which is at Mopani. Because obviously, if we are going to recapitalize, the question we'll ask ourselves is, do we have the team that would be able to manage this transition? Do we have the team that would be able to get resources and get the mine to another level? Madam Speaker, Mopani Copper Mines, before privatization, was under ZCCM. It was a division called Nkana Division. And I do recall, Madam Speaker, when I was growing up, that all of us on the Copper Belt were desirous to work for Mopani, for ZCCM, owing for two reasons. ZCCM had a training program where when you graduate from university, they begin training you to understand what is involved in mining, how to ensure that equipment is available, how to ensure that the copper gets out of the ground, and then you are able to export the copper. So ZCCM had a very comprehensive training program. Now, what that training program did, Madam Speaker, was that it created the right human resource, not only for that time, but for the years that were to come later on. What am I trying to say? Point number one, Madam Speaker. The engineers that were there during the time of ZCCM, those that transitioned into Mopani, technically, academically, in terms of their competences, I think all of us here agree that we have the right team in terms of the technical competences. These are Zambians that have been given skills over the years to run these mines. And I want to declare interest that I had a privilege of working for this very important institution called Mopani Copper Mines. Secondly, where are we coming from and how best can the new government take note? Because this conversation for me is about taking note of the issues, giving feedback, and then agreeing what do we do moving forward. And that will bring me to the issue of recapitalization. Madam Speaker, where we are coming from in Mopani, for those who may not be aware, and I think members of parliament from Mufulira, Kitwe, and other areas where Mopani may have an interest, will confirm and will agree with me that where we are coming from, there was a lot of blackmail. Now, this blackmail may not be seen today, but I think we might see it in future, where when we move towards an election, Madam Speaker, there would be a lot of threats in terms of job losses. We would have cases where, because the mines would want something from government, they would come and announce that we are going to place the mine on care and maintenance. Now, because of this uncertainty, especially for our workers, be it in Mufulira, be it in Kitwe, there was always this anxiety that would be presented to government. Now, a government that wants to secure jobs sometimes will focus on the jobs and not deal with the other fundamental issues. And I think it was important that the movers maybe could not have had enough time. And I want to mention that what used to happen on the Copper Belt was that every election, Madam Speaker, our Zambians would be threatened that they would lose jobs. So a step was taken. A step was taken that how do we ensure that since Mopani has announced, because there was an announcement, Madam Speaker, that Glencore were at the point of exiting Mopani. That was the status quo around 2019. Mopani, which was owned by Glencore at that time, Glencore had threatened that they were going to exit the mine. Now, any responsible government, even today, if any of the mines operating in Zambia announce that they want to exit, any responsible government would take interest to say, how do we secure the jobs of our Zambians? So the conversation we should be having now is that the step that was taken to secure the jobs for our many Zambians by holding on to the mine, because legally speaking, we own the mine as Zambians, but technically speaking, we are owing money to Glencore. And that is a very frank conversation that we should have. Legally, if you go to Pakra today, it is showing that we own the mine. ZCCM owns the mines. But technically speaking, Madam Speaker, that mine is owned by Glencore. And I'm saying this because we need to deal with a problem. The problem we have now is that we need to bring to the table ZCCM-IH, can you sit here? Glencore, can you sit here? So that we have a conversation on how we are going to sort out the issue of that money that we owe Glencore. That is the first issue. The second issue is, what do we do to ensure that jobs are secured? Because a conversation can take 10, 15 years. A conversation can take 1 year to 6 months. You are just discussing. The pressure from the constituencies where we are coming from. Minister of Mines, you are aware. And that is why, for me, I don't want to politicize this motion. I want us to deal with the issue. The issue here is that people out there are asking us, as members of parliament, from the Copper Belt, Christopher Kang'ombe, you are MP for Kamfinsa. What is happening to Mopani? We as contractors want to be paid so that we provide services. That is the issue that we are trying to discuss here. So for the mover, I'm trying to simplify the motion and then try and appeal to the minister for us to agree on a solution. The mover is not being malicious by saying, how do we put money into Mopani? Because sometimes the terms we use, recapitalization, it's a very financial technical term. I spent 5 minutes trying to look up the definition of recapitalization. They've given about 10 ways of recapitalization. Debt to Shan ratio, debt to equity, non-cash contribution to equity. These are complicated terms. If we are going to follow these terms, what the mover is saying is that there is a mine on the Copper Belt that is supposed to support jobs for our people. There's a mine on the Copper Belt that is supposed to provide services to our people. How do we put money into that company? That is what we should be discussing. So the question by the mover is that government, we are aware you've been discussing with Glencore. Now, these discussions, eventually they should culminate into putting money into the mine. So Minister of Mines, for me as Christopher Kang'ombe, representing the good people of Kamfinsa, I think that a frank conversation is important. This conversation, we can blame the previous government and say you did a wrong thing. Glencore was exiting and there was no one to hold on to the mine. Someone had to hold on to the mine. The government has held on to the mine. It is now up to you. You are the government, you are the minister. I don't see the Minister of Finance, but I think it's important that we put money into Mopani. How do we put money into Mopani? Do we recapitalize by putting an equity? Do we bring in a company and say, buy off these shares, and then let's pay off Glencore? If that is the method, Minister of Mines, tell this House, all the people want to hear is a solution. So for me, Madam Speaker, I support the proposal that we put money into Mopani so that we give life to Mopani. And that is what the mover is saying. The other issues are technical, the other issues are complicated, but for me, the issue is that we need to put money.
Order, your time is up. Thank you.